Today on the Relationship Revival Show, I'm joined by Mary Uncustomary England. Mary is a published author, life coach, event speaker, podcaster, and team building facilitator. She has 2 degrees in psychology, a dozen psychological disorders, and has run her own business since 2013, where she created her own job title of Merriment Maker. You're listening to the Relationship Revival Podcast with John DeBach, also known as Mr. Spirituality. That's me. I'm your host, giving you insights and guidance from over 10 years in the field of this amazing journey we call romance. On this show, I go over everything you need to know about how to get into a relationship, how to get the most out of a relationship, and sometimes even how to gracefully end a relationship without pulling your hair out and going crazy. And occasionally, I'm even joined by new and old friends who are also relationship experts to bring you guidance and wisdom with new perspectives. Thanks for stopping by. Mary Uncustomary England, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing really great. How about you?
I'm great. I am excited. I'm pumped to talk about joy. I don't talk about it nearly enough on this show because, whenever I have couples who come in, conflict is always what kind of drives them. No, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time it drives them to kind of come to couples therapy and so we have to deal with that. But I always tend to direct it and redirect it back to what would make you feel special, what would make you feel whole in the relationship. And it's pointing them to joy. I mean, you can sum it up like what would make you happy, and let's go after that. How did you get into this field of spreading and celebrating merriment that you're in?
I mean, I think most people get into anything that they're in as a result of not doing that thing or experiencing that thing for themselves. And if they're not, then they're probably not a very good teacher of that thing. So my answer is that I was deeply, deeply mentally ill and still am. I don't know that that necessarily goes away.
Mm-hmm.
I have a dozen disorders or neurodivergences or however you want to say that. And those started around age 8. And I was incredibly unhappy and had to kind of figure that out for myself. I did not have really any support from my parents, and they really just ignored all of that. I was very, very smart and gifted, and it was like not really an option for me to have anything wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
So I had to like beg.
Can I ask what the first kind of diagnosis or like how it started when you were 8? What was the first thing that kind of like was the red flag that said, hey, something's a little different?
Yeah, the first things were a combination of ticking. So I have Tourette's and OCD were the first 2 things that were coming together. And those are actually really common to happen, comorbidity. So the tics were very obvious, and it was kind of something that no one could ignore. And that was something that people were bringing to my parents and myself and showing to me, like mirroring back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not something you could really ignore. And it's very uncomfortable as well. It doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, those still happen. That's something that doesn't really necessarily go away. But anyway, they weren't very helpful, and it wasn't necessarily diagnosed either because they wouldn't do anything about it. So I had to beg to go to therapy when I was 15 years old. And
so
that's
for 7 years, you were struggling on your own, essentially.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's rough.
Yeah. And that led to an enormous amount of other complications like depression and an eating disorder and self-harm and suicide ideation and attempts. And, because when things aren't taken care of, they, go out into other ways. So, and that's really like the beginning of that story and how it kind of manifests into other things. And I think, I don't know, because of my experience in that world, and, it's not like I wouldn't have necessarily had a different time if my parents had intervened, maybe it would have, if they would have taken me to like a specialist or something, it could have changed maybe, but I still would have these natural biological impulses or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I, regardless, have experienced this different brain and body. And I think regardless, that would have made me feel unhappy in my own body. When you experience that like bodily, um, it's like almost like a dissociation, or you feel like your body's betraying you a little bit. I think people experience that with chronic illness as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
But because of
absolutely.
that, I, was so unhappy. And I just realized over time that I needed to do something about it. When I was in my 20s, I was so, so unhappy that I was like dissociating from my body, and I was doing this thing called dissociative fugue. So I'd like end up in fields without
Hmm.
my shoes on and stuff. And
In
I,
fugue states, I think they call it, right?
yeah. So I was just trying to like just repulse everything and leave. And I just knew something had to shake and change. So I started going to cognitive behavioral therapy, and I did some really intense stuff where I kind of just made more space in my brain over a 6-month period. It was really, really intense and tough. And just, it's kind of like exposure therapy, where if you were scared of a snake, you kind of just like do different steps of how you can be pro with the snake. You would try to like look at a snake and then hold a snake and then be in a room with the snake and then maybe get a snake as a pet if that was your anxiety. So I would do stuff where, I had these irrational fears about things that I couldn't do for like obsessive compulsive rituals and stuff. The idea that I couldn't make a full circle with my body. So my homework would be walk around a table. And it seems insane that that's homework, but that's what I would have to do. And after that 6-month period, I graduated from that program. And all of a sudden, my body felt like I was a different person almost. And I had all this space, and I didn't feel like a walking symptom anymore. And I started like, oh, what do I do with this? It's like when you quit a job or something and you have more time, but I had
Yeah.
more space in my body. So I didn't know what to do. And I started creating like I did when I was a kid. And then I started blogging about that and documenting
How
it.
how old
And
were you when the 6-month stretch happened?
I was 20, 23,
So 8
23 or
years old,
24.
you're just I want to get the timeline because
Yeah.
it's fascinating. So 8 years old, things were showing up. Didn't
Hmm.
have anything till 15, and then from 15 to your early 20s, the CBT or whatever you were doing had maybe some impact, but not significant
From
enough.
15 to 23, there was just medication and basic like talking therapy. There was nothing really in there. And the CBT shows up at 23 for a 6-month period. And that's really what fixed me, honestly. Not
Okay,
fixed, but like that 15 to
changed your
22
life, right?
changed my life.
Right, right,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah. So that 15 to 22 was like it was a management period and
Okay,
barely anything.
okay.
And 23 was, yeah, it it was a life changer, and it
Right.
saved me. And that's when I started blogging and everything started shifting. People were like, "Why are you doing this? Where is this coming from?" Because I was doing this street art that was coming out of nowhere. It was bizarre. I was yarn bombing things where you knit stuff and like wrap it around poles, and I didn't even know why I was doing that. And I was putting like I was filling up like socks and putting red shoes on them and acting like they were like the Wizard of Oz feet, like under like the witch's feet under Dorothy's thing. It's a crazy weird stuff. I was putting googly eyes on everything before people were putting googly eyes on stuff, and nobody knew why I was doing anything. It was very absurdist art and stuff, and that people were asking because blogging was cool back then, and people were engaged still. And I told them, what was happening, and I started explaining this journey. And I guess it was like, I guess I'm liking myself again.
Hmm.
This is what's happening, and it kind of became really popular. And that's where my blog was born. And then 6 months later, I ended up quitting my job and starting this as a business, and that's
Hmm.
how this all started.
Well, that leads us to kind of the world of merriment making. Let's define it. What is that?
I define merriment making as embodying joy, creating joy, and spreading joy. And we can't really do any of that if we're not also looking at the things that limit us and being able to, examine our fears and be able to be real about the logistics involved with that. So I'm clear about, our real life circumstances and, the 1, 2, 3 steps, the tangible and the theory involved in that. But it's really about needing to feel good so that we can do good.
And
That's
how do you
it.
teach that? How do you help people kind of get that?
Oh,
Because you do
it's
so much. People who aren't familiar with your group and with all your coaching and events, they like it. The amount of work that Mary has put into this and continues to on a regular basis is, I couldn't do it. I mean, I was just talking to her before the interview, like, how do you do all this? It's amazing to me.
it's insane, honestly. It's weird because even when I try to give myself an elevator pitch or explain what I do to people, it takes a little bit because it's not it's not a one sentence thing. I've never been a one sentence kind of person. I just did an interview with a photographer who had no semblance or understanding or background for who I was, and it took him a very long time to get what I was doing. And part of me is bothered by that a little bit, because I don't fit into anything, and part of me is like, no, but that's actually really cool. But it does make it a little harder for people to get on board, I think, because it's not as clear. And I am working on that. But how I teach it is ultimately no different than any personal development, you know, system or program. I think, it's just straightforward in terms of the modality or logistics. And if you're wondering about that, it's like, it's a masterclass, it's a video, it's a, it's a podcast or a worksheet or something like that. I'm
Yeah.
very clear about that. But in terms of the method, I mean, I'm making sure that I'm teaching people how to be kind and how to create good news, how we are thinking about, like, we always have these beliefs in our head of like, I'm a kind person, of course I'm a kind person. And then we go out in the world and we see someone drop something and it's like, yeah, but I'm busy. I'm too busy to do that. Like, not today. Not today. I can't, not right now. And it's like, well, how many times can you say not today before you are no longer a kind person? You know what I mean? Like, where does the
Hmm.
cognitive dissonance step in? How long can you say that you are a poet, and how many years can you not write poems before you were just not a poet anymore? And
Right.
I'm kind of here to like insert the idea of, if you want good news, let's go create some ourselves. Let's stop waiting for it. Let's stop complaining about all the bad news and let's make some.
I think it's a great approach. I think that I always tell my clients something very similar, that happiness is a skill, and it's like any other skill, you have to exercise it to make it strong. And so
Yeah.
that goes completely, I mean, I think we're in lockstep, the idea of go create the good news that you want in your life. I think that's a brilliant, and it's empowering, right? I think a lot of people think of joy or merriment or as something that just kind of happens upon you. And the idea that you can go out and create it for yourself is incredibly empowering. It's an incredibly powerful message for people.
And it extends, I think we can think about this as, yeah, I can go write a sticky note and give it to someone as like a very simple tote bag inspiration idea of kindness, of random act of kindness I could post on, Instagram or whatever. And that's wonderful. But this idea of creating good news isn't just this uh, Instagram activism either. It is something that extends throughout your all areas of the wheel of your life. It's for you as well. The good news that you want to see needs to be available for you in all permeations of you. So what good news do you want to see in your relationship? What good news do you want to see in your health? What good news do you want to see if your life was a newspaper and you woke up today to see what was on page 6 for you? What good news do you want to see? And like, how can you make that happen? Because you are in charge. Like you said, you have to create the good news. Like, you have to create joy. Joy is the skill that you need to, like, the muscle that you need to work. And I am also like, I have degrees in psychology. I worked at a psychiatric rehab center for 5 years, and I have, a dozen of these disorders myself. So I am also not coming at this from, I know that I dress the way that I do. And I know, because I know so much about psychology, I know that we have like a 10-second or less than a tenth of a second to make a first impression. And so much of that is done by our clothing and our physical appearance. And I know that because I do present as very colorful and potentially frivolous, that people don't always take the way that I'm speaking or the way that I sound or what I am saying to be as commanding or as powerful or as effective as it could be. And I take that into consideration. So I always just want to like be clear that what I am saying is always grounded and backed by scientific and psychological research. And I
Sure.
just present it in the way that's like fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's important to note. I mean, you don't want to think that the person's just like, let's go color today because I feel like
Right.
it. It's like
Yeah.
there's some deep clinical research behind it. Do you ever get to the point where you have people you've worked with where they take it to the other extreme, where everything becomes about joy and there's this sense of inner celebration where maybe they neglect certain responsibilities? I don't know if that's ever happened because maybe the people who do come to you don't have that issue, but has it come up before?
I don't think that I've ever gotten to the point where I've been working with someone where they get so far in a chronic sense, like a long-term sense, that that becomes something um, when they're working with me. No, I think at first the thing that comes to mind is that when we ever work on anything, we tend to overcorrect a boundary. And what most people are commonplace to do is use gratitude practices and these quote unquote good vibes only practices as a overcorrective band-aid for negative or quote unquote toxic energy. And we establish too much of a boundary wall, and these what I'm starting to see as like using HR language in relationships and kind of just losing the nuance of love and connection and ourselves. And I think that that is the more of the danger, because if you do continue to work with me or yourself, you will over time realize that there is nuance. And that's something that I really, really strive to teach with merriment making, is that I am an optimist, but I am a practical optimist. This is all about circumstance, and nothing is black or white. It's all very gray. But if you sometimes, I mean, when you come out of something that's really horrible, you want to be like, okay, gratitude's working. Let's go all in with gratitude. Let's do good vibes only. And you can only do that for so long before that itself becomes the toxic thing. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. People, you're and you see it all the time with whatever
Mhm.
you're teaching with, people who have addiction issues, and then they're like, I'm going to work out, and then the workout becomes the
I was
addiction,
just going
and
to say, like,
right,
anything can become heroin,
right, right,
yoga's the heroin now. It doesn't really
right.
matter.
Yeah, yeah, I totally see. Um, what do you find is the maybe the age? Because listen, when you're a kid, everybody has that pursuit of joy. Well, not everybody, but I mean, the vast majority of us have this kind of pursuit of just joy and exploration and adventure and wonder. And then at a certain point, it goes away, and we get stuck in, I guess, the adult mind, right? And so there's
Yeah.
this kind of resentment towards that sense of exploration. Do you find that it happens at different times for people? Do you go back and trace steps of where they lost a sense of it, or do you go back to having like that childlike sense of wonder, or is it different as an adult to kind of have a new approach to joy and merriment?
Well, those are two different questions. But so, I mean, it is different for everyone. And I think there's a couple things that um, you can find where that happens for people. I think the first thing is asking them where they first felt that their confidence in their own autonomy was shaken. So, like, I can ask you, like, where did you know that your truth was something that you had to second guess? Like, if you were told, you saw something, for example, you saw that this truck was blue, and you told your mom, "Oh, I saw the blue truck," and they were like, "Actually, that truck's red." And you said, "No, the truck's blue." And they said, "I don't care. The truck's red." And you had to reconcile with this dissociation and this dissonance of, I know that I believe that I saw that the truck was blue.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, who I trust and am supposed to understand is this figure for me, someone that I believe and trust, is telling me something completely different. And now I have to come to terms with the fact that I have to either trust that the truck is blue in my heart or trust my mom. And there's this point that happens. And obviously, the situation is usually not as simple as a color. It's usually something much bigger than that.
Right.
But you can come back to that point. And I think that is one big moment where we can notice where you start to lose that sense of innocence and that feeling of childlike wonder and awe. That's a very big moment. And that can happen at as young as like 4 or 5 or 12. It doesn't really matter. That's very unique. The other one is when you are told, like, when you need to begin accepting more responsibility than is like kind of appropriate, which is a really stupid word, for your age. You know, like, when you need to start working, so to speak. When are you supposed to like start maybe even taking care of someone older than you? I think a lot of people have like a caregiver complex when they're growing up, and maybe they need to start putting someone into bed or taking care of someone who's sick, or even just like hearing something that's you know, too adult for them. We are, as children, kind of taken advantage of in a lot of situations and told to be a little bit more adult than we are. And I think that those are two big things that we overlook, and children are seen and children need to be more safe and protected a lot more than they are. And those are two really big things that happen as children.
Well, let's dive. When you say they need to be kept more safe and protected, what do you mean by that? I think that's something that I don't want to just gloss over, because that's an important point.
I mean, obviously physically, you know, I think that goes without saying, but I mean, by that, I mean very, so if I'm around a child, if you're around a child and you have you kind of just like, will naturally want to be aware of your language a little bit more when you're around in the presence of a child. Maybe you want to like, if you can, you try not to curse, or maybe you even like raise your tone of voice a little bit, just like the volume. You have like a little, it's like that baby talk feeling, like it's like an instinct.
The pitch
almost
changes. Yeah.
It's a pitch. Yeah. It changes a little bit. Now imagine like if that was happening, that can't happen all the time if you're a parent, right? Like that just doesn't happen because you're in a state of constant, because you can't be on, so to speak, all the time. Right. But that urge that you're feeling to do that when you're like around a new child is what they want. That's what they want. They want to perform for you. They want to show you what they want. They want to like feel safe around you. And that feeling of you wanting to like protect them. That's that pitch going up, that I want to like not say anything weird around you. I want to like, if you have that energy, that capsule of saying, hey, what is it? Hey, but like if you have all the energy in the world for that one little person and you're like, oh yeah, what's up, buddy? Like, tell me what you want. And like the parent's like, I don't have energy for this, right? It's like that aunt versus mom energy. If you could be that person for that child all the time, how amazing would their self-esteem be? I'm not saying that it's realistic. I'm saying that that's what they need more of. And that's the safety factor, I think. But it goes so far that sometimes we forget that we need to be on a little bit for kids, and we go and tell them or show them or allow them to witness things that are so beyond above their pay grade.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point to make. I mean, I have 4 kids myself, and it's funny, but like the firstborn that gets more of that pitch versus the fourthborn who
Yeah.
gets less. Well, the third, the second and third get a
Right.
little less, and then the fourth, you're like, this is my last shot, and then so you overcompensate, right? Which is
But
going
why are we
back.
laughing right now? It's because it's uncomfortable. Because
Yeah,
it's a joke because it's like, and it's
yeah.
like it's funny, but it's horrifying,
Yeah. It
and
is a little scary. And you see it because it's like, oh, now we gotta correct some of that, and how
right.
do I build the child's confidence back up? And it feels like it's unfair. And then it starts bringing up your own biases like, well, I was a second born, my wife was a firstborn.
And it's an excuse.
Right.
It's all an excuse, and it's not the children's fault. You decided to have 4 children,
Right.
and it's like, but the kid doesn't know. The kid's gonna grow up, and the kid's gonna think like, why?
Right.
And that kid's gonna be like, well, and it's a whole thing. So the kids need as much of that like pitch bubble, that aunt energy versus mom energy as they can muster as they
Yeah.
grow up.
It's so, I think a great example the other night, my youngest asked me who the favorite was. And it's like a running joke in my house that we always try to tell each kid they're the favorite in their own
Right.
personal private time. And so I
Right.
whispered it to her and it wasn't good enough anymore. She's like, no, you need to say it out loud in front of everybody. And I'm just like, oh, she's caught on. Oh
Yeah.
no. So like this bubble's going to burst. What do I do now? And I didn't have a good answer. So she ran away crying because it was, and it's like, okay. So, and you're right. Like protecting that bubble, protecting that vision, protecting that pitch that you have it's very fragile. And I
Yeah.
think, people underestimate how fragile it is as adults. I see it all the time in couples work where we get just like, that you have a pitch for your kids, you should have a pitch, you should have a tone for your partner.
Mhm.
And people get complacent and they get rough and they get angry. And then when they come to me after they've been together for 19 years and like, I don't understand why she doesn't like to talk to me anymore. And I'm like, well, because you're talking like that,
Yep.
and it's like, oh yeah, we got to slow down, stop. And that's a big part of daily life and relationships. I think with you, what's interesting is it's first and foremost a relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And I think the inner child as well, because this whole thing, I think part of merriment making really is that I'm so aware that none of us were prepared to be adults.
Yeah.
No one was. None of us knew that we were going to have to like be the ones that were going to fill the toilet paper, like
Right.
that you were going to grow up and you were going to get money. We were excited about that.
Right.
But then you were going to use that money to buy toilet
Toys.
paper.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
we were excited to get money for candy and toys, but now we don't
Right.
even have that money for that. We have to do it. We have to go to work and we have to use that money for boring stuff. Are you
Right.
kidding?
Right.
This is annoying. No one talked to us about this. No one
Right.
talked to us about our backs hurting or the toilet paper. Like this is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
We didn't go to school for toilet paper. This is so dumb.
Yeah.
And not only that, but like when we grew up, we had that innocence shaken out of us. So many people weren't in that bubble. So we all have this like weird traumas and all these like individual stuff, things that we're going
Mhm.
through. And the world is like a whole thing, and there's so much stuff that we're all dealing with on a regular basis. And it's like, can we just breathe for just a second and like can we have like a little existential crisis of joy? Just a
Mhm.
little bit, like in a day, just a second. And remember that we're like alive for a moment on a weird blue marble that's floating in something that we can't really describe. And kind of embrace like a little bit of optimistic nihilism for just a second and be like, what if it doesn't matter? Isn't that beautiful? Couldn't that be nice for just a second? If nothing matters, if we're gonna get that far down, couldn't that be wonderful? What if that's liberating? What if everything is nothing? I don't know. Isn't that lovely? I don't know. Or we can say that everything matters. And isn't that lovely? What if both are true? I don't know. And I don't know if we have this inner child that is so needing us, then what are we doing about it? Like it didn't go anywhere. It just grew up with us. Every single thing that we need comes back to this little kid that's just mad or sad or bullied. And we just need to love them more. I don't know.
I think it's a great thought. It's a great question to leave people with for sure. Um, the best way for people to get a hold of you and start working with you, I think you have an amazing membership going on right now. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the membership? It's on uncustomary.org.
Mhm.
I think //movement, right? Is that the
Mhm.
link? Tell
Yeah.
people kind of a little bit of, you peel back the curtain, what they can expect if they become a member.
Yeah. So it's called the Merriment Makers, and you you get a Facebook group community, but if you don't do social media, you can get everything on Teachable as well. But you get every week we do a merriment mission, and it's like a 5-step thing where you get to go out and do like a random act of kindness and make your good news. And there's a printable that comes with that and everything. But there's also 20 other resources that happen every single month. So it's kind of like you're getting a new course every month on a completely new topic. And it's through the lens of merriment making, but it's like self-love. So this month we're doing how to dress for joy. And next month we'll do how to experience pleasure. And then, other months we've done, just how to spread good news, or how to celebrate life, or how to play. It's just all different lenses of that. And there's things about, there's fillable workbooks, there's master classes, there's journaling prompts, there's meditations, there's EFT tapping, there's a chat, there's a newsletter that comes to your house, there's texting if you're in the United States. I mean, it's truly a whole experience. I mean, it's a very all-inclusive experience. It's quite amazing. There's a free trial for a week if you want to just give it a test whirl. Honestly, I can't talk more about it because it's a whole thing. I've never really seen a membership group like this.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is you've put so much work and you continuously put so much work into this. It's the most,
you get access to all the archives too. Like, it's like, I can't even talk about how much, like, as soon as you get in, it's just immediate archives.
It's the most content rich. Like, it's clear that you care, like there are memberships in other parts of the world on joy or on meditation or on little things. And then oftentimes you get this feeling of, you join and then you're like, is this really worth it? I don't think you can do that with yours, where you join and you're like, I don't know. It's like, oh, I mean, in fact, the other way, it's like, wow, I got like the bargain of the century here.
It is, yeah. I sometimes I'll join and it's like twice as much as mine, and it's like 5 resources like for the whole thing. And this is 20 resources at least every month, plus all the archives. It's truly insane. I don't know. I'm an idiot.
Let's just to drop. I'll put the links and some more information in the show notes. But just verbally to put it out again, it's uncustomary.org/movement. Is there anything else you want to share before we sign off?
I don't know. Just keep feeling good, because the more that you make yourself feel good, then the more we can go out and continue to do good things. And that is part of what I believe merriment making is. I think a lot of self-love and personal development things don't harness the idea of the end game being to give back at the end of it. It's a lot of like manifesting and self-love, and that is very important. But I want to make sure that we are, at the end of the day, making sure that the end goal here is to go create good news, not just for ourselves, but for other people. And we can't do that until we feel good. But the goal here is to do good at the end. So feel good so you can do good.
Well said. Mary Uncustomary, thank you so much for being with us.
If you're interested in learning how to get the absolute most out of your romantic relationships, then you're in luck, because I have put together a free workshop, or masterclass, if you will, about 3 secrets that people in happy relationships have discovered. You can view the workshop at mrspirituality.com/3secrets. Again, it's completely free. Just go there and watch it. It'll help you on your journey, give you some wisdom, some things to think about. The website again is mrspirituality.com/3secrets. That's mrspirituality.com/3, the word secrets. It's all yours. Enjoy.